The dense canopy of the jungle swayed under a gentle breeze as Sarah stepped off the jeep, her boots crunching against the gravel path. Her heart thumped in her chest, a mix of anxiety and excitement coursing through her veins. She was finally here, in the heart of the sanctuary that had been Koba's home for the last 8 years. But this wasn't just any visit. It was a reunion she had been dreaming of and dreading in equal measure. The murmurs of the staff around her only heightened her unease. "It's dangerous," the man replied, glancing at Sarah with a mix of pity and skepticism. "Gorillas don't remember humans like that. He might not even recognize her." Sarah heard them, but didn't respond. She gripped the strap of her bag tighter, her knuckles turning white. She knew the risks. She had been warned by countless experts, friends, and even her own family. "He's a full-grown silverback now," they had said. "They're unpredictable." Sarah had met Koba when he was just a helpless infant, no bigger than a loaf of bread. He had been rescued from poachers, his mother brutally killed for bushmeat. At just 6 months old, he had been traumatized, emaciated, and clinging to life. Sarah, a young intern at a wildlife rehabilitation center at the time, had been assigned to his care. Koba had clung to her from the very beginning, literally. In those first weeks, he would wrap his tiny arms around her neck and refuse to let go, his small body trembling with fear. She had slept in his enclosure, fed him from a bottle, and even sung lullabies to soothe his cries in the dead of night. Slowly, he began to heal. His playful spirit emerged, and Sarah found herself enchanted by his intelligence, his curiosity, and the way he seemed to understand her in a way no human ever had. They had spent years together, inseparable. She had taught him how to climb, how to forage, and even how to trust again. He had, in turn, taught her about resilience, patience, and the unspoken bond that could exist between two beings from entirely different worlds. But as Koba grew, it became clear that he needed more than she could provide. His weathered face was kind but serious, his brow furrowed in concern. "I assume you understand the risks of what you're asking," he said, his tone measured. "Koba is not the same gorilla you knew. He's a dominant silverback now, with a troop to protect. If he perceives you as a threat, I'm not a threat to him," Sarah interrupted, her voice steadier than she felt. "I raised him, Dr. Greaves. I know him better than anyone." Dr. Greaves sighed, folding his arms across his chest. "Gorillas have incredible memories, it's true. But they're also ruled by their instincts. If he doesn't recognize you, or if he feels cornered, there's no telling how he might react." Sarah nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I just need a chance, one chance to see him again. If there's even a small part of him that remembers me, it's worth it." Dr. Greaves studied her for a long moment before relenting. "Understood?" Sarah said, her voice firm. The path to the gorilla enclosure was lined with towering trees, their branches forming a green cathedral overhead. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and the distant calls of birds. Sarah's footsteps felt heavy as she walked alongside Dr. Greaves and a small team of sanctuary staff. Each step brought her closer to Koba and to the uncertainty of what lay ahead. When they reached the viewing platform, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. There he was. Koba stood at the edge of the clearing, his massive frame bathed in dappled sunlight. He was magnificent. His dark fur gleamed and his broad chest exuded strength and authority. He moved with a regal grace, surveying his surroundings with an air of quiet confidence. For a moment, Sarah was paralyzed. This was not the playful, clumsy Koba she had known. This was a creature of immense power, a leader, a protector. And yet, as she watched him, she saw flashes of the gorilla she had raised, the tilt of his head. "Go ahead," Dr. Greaves said quietly, gesturing for her to step forward. Sarah took a deep breath and moved closer to the enclosure's edge. Her hands trembled as she called out softly, "Koba, it's me. It's Sarah." At first, there was no reaction. Koba continued to scan the clearing, his gaze sweeping over her without recognition. But then, something shifted. His movement slowed, and his eyes locked onto hers. Time seemed to stand still. Sarah's heart raced as she held his gaze, willing him to remember. She raised her hand and performed a gesture they had shared, a gentle wave, followed by a tap on her chest. It was something she had done countless times when he was a baby, a way of saying, "I'm here." Koba's brow furrowed, his massive head tilting slightly to one side. For a moment she thought it hadn't worked. But then he took a step closer, and another. The staff tensed, their hands hovering near tranquilizer guns, but Sarah wasn't afraid. She stayed perfectly still, her eyes never leaving Koba's. When he was just a few feet away, he stopped. Slowly, almost hesitantly, he reached out a massive hand and touched the ground in front of her. It was a gesture of acknowledgement, a tentative. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as she knelt, mirroring his movement by placing her hand on the ground. "It's me, Koba," she whispered. "I never forgot you." Koba's deep, rumbling breath filled the air as he studied her. Then, with a low, resonant grunt, he touched his chest, an echo of the gesture she had taught him all those years ago. It was enough. For the first time in 8 years, Sarah felt the weight of her guilt and fear lift. Koba remembered her. Their bond, though tested by time and distance, had not been broken. And in that moment, surrounded by the whispers of the jungle, Sarah knew she had made the right choice. The warning hum. As she approached the sanctuary's visitor platform, Dr. Alan Greaves, the sanctuary's director, met her with a stern expression. "Sarah, you do understand the risks of what you're about to do, don't you?" he said, his voice calm but firm. "I do," Sarah replied, adjusting her bag on her shoulder. "But I raised him, Dr. Greaves. I need to see him again, just once." Dr. Greaves sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "Koba isn't the same gorilla you knew. He's a silverback now, and his instincts are different. He has a troop to protect. If he feels threatened, even by you, he won't hesitate to act." "I'm not a threat to him," Sarah said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Maybe not intentionally. The reunion. The viewing platform overlooked a large, open clearing surrounded by dense jungle." Sarah's breath hitched as she spotted Koba. He stood at the edge of the clearing, his broad shoulders glinting in the sunlight. He was magnificent, towering over the other gorillas in his troop. Her heart swelled with a mix of awe and fear. This was not the playful, mischievous baby she had known. "Koba," she whispered, her voice trembling. Dr. Greaves and the sanctuary staff stood behind her, their tranquilizer guns at the ready. "Proceed cautiously," he warned. Sarah stepped closer, her hands shaking. She raised her hand in a familiar gesture, a gentle wave, followed by a tap on her chest. It was the signal she had always used to say, "I'm here." Koba didn't react at first. His gaze swept over her, cold and detached. Her heart sank, but she tried again, repeating the gesture and calling his name. Then, to her astonishment, Koba reached out a massive hand and touched the ground in front of her. It was a gesture of acknowledgement, one she had taught him as a baby. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as she knelt and mirrored his gesture, placing her hand on the ground. "It's me, Koba," she whispered. "I never forgot you." Koba's deep, rumbling breath filled the air. Slowly, he touched his chest, a sign of trust and recognition. The emotional connection, as Sarah and Koba reconnected, memories flooded her mind. She remembered the nights she had stayed up with him, singing lullabies to calm his cries. She remembered the way he had clung to her, refusing to let go, and the joy in his eyes when he had learned to climb for the first time. Koba's gaze softened, as if he too remembered those moments. He reached out and gently touched Sarah's arm, his massive hand dwarfing her own. The staff watched in awe. "I can't believe it," one of them whispered. "He remembers her." The unexpected turn suddenly. A loud noise shattered the moment, a sharp crack of a branch breaking in the distance. Koba's head snapped up, and his demeanor changed instantly. His muscles tensed, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. The sanctuary staff sprang into action, shouting warnings and preparing their tranquilizers. "Stand back," Dr. Greaves ordered. But Sarah didn't move. She stayed calm, her eyes locked on Koba's. "It's okay, Koba," she said softly, her voice steady. "It's just a noise. You're safe." Koba's growl subsided as he looked back at Sarah. Slowly, she began to soothe him, and his familiar tune seemed to soothe him, and his posture relaxed. The staff's change of heart, Dr. Greaves and the staff lowered their weapons, their expressions shifting from fear to amazement. "I've worked with gorillas for over 20 years," Dr. Greaves said quietly. "I've never seen anything like this." Sarah smiled through her tears. Before she left, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small scarf, a keepsake from their time together. She held it out to Koba, who took it gently in his massive hands. "This is for you," she said, her voice breaking. Koba held the scarf close, his eyes meeting hers one last time. As Sarah walked away, she glanced back to see Koba sitting at the edge of the clearing, the scarf draped over his lap. He watched her leave, a silent tribute to the bond they had shared. Conclusion. Sarah's heart ached as she left the sanctuary, but it was a bittersweet ache. She had found closure, knowing that their connection had stood the test of time and distance. The story of Sarah and Koba became a symbol of hope, a testament to the power of love and memory. And though their worlds were now separate, they would always